My name is Natalia, and I am going to start talking about the end of the World War II. At the end of the World War II, huge swaths of Europe and Asia had been reduced to ruins. Borders were redrawn, and homecomings, explosions, and burials were underway. But the massive efforts to rebuild had just begun. When the war began in the late 1930s, the world's population was approximately 2 billion. In less than a decade, the war between the Axis and the Allied powers had resulted in 80 million deaths, killing off about 4% of the whole world. Allied forces now became occupiers, taking control of Germany, Japan, and much of the territory they had formerly ruled. Efforts were made to permanently distance the war-making abilities of those nations, as factories were destroyed and former leadership was removed for prosecuting. Now comes the new world geopolitical orders. The first geopolitical theory is the Heartland theory, drawn up in 1904 by English geographer Sir Mulford Mackinder. The Heartland was described by Mackinder as the area bounded to the west by the Volga, the Yangtze River to the east, from the Arctic to the north, and the south from the western Himalayas. At the time, this area was almost entirely controlled by the Russian Empire. In terms of countries, the Heartland consists mainly of Russia, Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, Mongolia, the central countries, and parts of Iran, China, Belarus, and Ukraine. The second geopolitical theory was Rimland. Another important lodestar for U.S. foreign policy was developed in the 1930s by the American Nicholas J. Speakman. The Rimlands is divided into four main areas: Europe, North Africa, Middle East, and Asia. The Rimland essentially consists of Europe, including Eastern Europe, Turkey, the Middle East, the Gulf States, India, Pakistan, Southeast Asia, and Japan. Now comes the bipolarity between Soviet Union and USA. Bipolarity refers to the distribution of power among states after World War II, and it is that peculiar distribution of power, some scholars claim, that accounts for both the antagonism that developed between the United States and the Soviet Union, and the fact that the antagonism, though intense, did not lead to a major war between them. It explains, in other words, why there was a war between East and West, and also why the war remained closed. The economic problems of the Soviet Union, which led to the independence of Eastern Europe and the reunification of Germany, have changed the distribution of power among states. As much of the literature of bipolarity will let us to suspect this change of the distribution of power was accompanied by the end of the Cold War. Now comes the D-Day. On June 6, 1944, more than 160,000 Allied troops landed along a 50-mile stretch of heavily fortified French coastline to fight Nazi Germany on the beaches of Normandy, France. Jean W.W. Eisenhower called the operation a crusade in which we will accept nothing less but full victory. More than 5,000 ships and 13,000 aircraft supported the D-Day invasion, and by day's end, the Allies gained a foothold in continental Europe. The cost in lives on D-Day was high. More than 9,000 Allied soldiers were killed or wounded, but their sacrifice allowed more than 100,000 soldiers to begin the slow, hard slog across the Europe to defeat Adolf Hitler's crack troops. On May 7, 1945, Germany officially surrendered to the Allies, bringing an end to the European conflict in the World War II. General Alfred Jodl, representing the German High Command, signed the unconditional surrender of both East and West forces in Reims, France, which would take effect to the following day. As a result, May 8 was declared victory in Europe. A holiday is still celebrated by many European countries. After suffering devastating casualties at each other's hands during World War II, the US and Japan were able to forge a strong diplomatic alliance. The US State Department still refers to the American-Japanese relationship as the cornerstone of US security interests in Asia and fundamental to regional stability and prosperity. The Pacific half of World War II, which began with Japan's attack on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii on December 7, 1941, ended almost 4 years later when Japan surrendered to American-led allies on September 2, 1945. The surrender came after the United States had dropped 2 atomic bombs, Nagasaki and Hiroshima, on Japan. Japan lost some 3 million people in the war. Now we're going to listen an interview about some points of World War II. What is your point of view of World War II?
If all the wars are cruel and unjust, this one it was still more.
For you, what is communism?
A system of social organization in which all economic and social activity is controlled by a totalitarian state dominated by a single and self-perpetuating political party.
And what do you think about capitalism?
It's an economic system in which investment in and ownership of the means of production, distribution, and exchange of wealth is made and maintained chiefly by private individuals or corporations, especially as contrasted to corporatively or state-owned means of wealth.
Thank you so much. At this final part, I am going to talk about my point of view of this topic, and I think know these points of our history. It is so important because I think it's essential for our cultural knowledge.